The panelists on this show are committed to various aspects of ministry.
But we are also ordinary people.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm so glad you've tuned in. This is going to be an interesting and a little bit of a different program than we're used to here on the Town Hall. I'm looking forward to this discussion. It's going to be more of a personal revelation time and personal testimony time than it is the usual discussion we have about some controversial issue, as you heard as presented by those who began by opening statements here on the program. But before we get into that, I'd like for you to meet the panelists. They're going to tell who they are and a little bit about what they do. So we'll begin with the gentleman to my right.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the Senior Minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
I am Mel Robeck. I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God, and I serve my church at Fuller Theological Seminary as Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as the Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm President of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here today, and a special thanks to you for tuning in. As you've noticed, if you tuned in from time to time, the panelists on this program, the American Religious Town Hall, come from a variety of churches and religious traditions. In addition to their participation in this telecast, they have normal, everyday lives that make them similar to members of our audience, but in some ways, they may also be different. Some, for instance, are clergy. Others are not. Some are pastors, others are administrators or denominational leaders, and still others are professors. One thing that they have in common, however, is that they all are people of faith. A member of our viewing audience has wondered how different they might be when they are off the air. He has asked to hear something of their personal story. How, for instance, did they come to faith? And how has their faith changed over time? With such an interest being expressed, we asked our panelists to respond to one of the following topics here. How did you come to faith? And has your faith changed over time? Another thing we'd like to ask our panelists, what drew you to ministry or into the position that you now occupy? And how do you wish that you'd ever had done something else? And then finally, what is it that keeps you awake at night as you think about those who are around you and the things that are going on in your life and in this world? Again, it's a little bit of a different approach to this subject, but since someone wrote in about it, we thought it'd be interesting for us to have that kind of discussion and conversation around the table. Let's go back to those who helped to begin the program. And Dr. Luxton, if you can tell us a little bit about your experience, how you came to where you are today, and how your faith has been sustained or has changed through the years.
There's some very good questions as a lead into this, and I grew up as a Christian. I was born into a Seventh-day Adventist home, so I had faith early on in my life. But I would like to believe that that has significantly deepened over time. You know, I really like the story of Peter, you know, where you see him very impulsive and passionate about his relationship with Christ. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of overconfidence. It's all about I will never deny you, I will this. And then as you see that transformation, as we move into the book of Acts, when you hear Peter speak, the I has gone, and the focus is very much on who God is. And I would like to think that is the shift that has taken place over time in my life, through good times, but also some very challenging times. That I've moved from, yes, passion, but seeing myself as part of that, me being the center, moving towards God being much more the center. I suppose if I talk about that then a little bit in the context of my calling and what's happened with that, both my parents were educators, and so the love of teaching was with me very, very early on. For a while I thought about being a minister, but I eventually shifted back into education. And I just want to talk about one transforming moment for me. When I was 18, I'd been going through Christian schools, and I went into a public university. And for the first time, I was in an environment where my teachers were coming from a different frame. And it's interesting, I sat there in English literature classes, great professors, great teachers, and I thought, there's something missing here. Just something missing here. Now, my mother had been an English teacher, and I was studying English, and I kind of said, how would she have taught this? And I think I realized very clearly at age 18 that the faith dimension to the teaching, that connection between belief and living faithfully within a discipline, an academic discipline, was missing. I shifted back from there into a more faith-based environment, and decided then that I wanted to be an educator, and I wanted to be an educator in a Christian environment where I could help other students connect their faith growth and their growth of themselves intellectually. And that's what I've been in ever since. I mean, I never expected in my life, this is my third presidency, I never expected anything like that in my life. I was just going to be in the classroom, and just doors have opened up as I've tried to listen to the voice of God in the way I've lived out my calling and my passion for faith.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Luxon, and for that transparent expose of your experience so far. And then, Dr. Robeck, you also started with an opening statement. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, yeah, like you, let me say it this way. My parents were clergy. My mother before my father. She was a church planter, and the two of them married, and they led a number of churches through the years. My grandfather was a pastor, and he had 4 brothers who were pastors, and his father was a pastor. So it goes back now 4 generations, and actually I have a son who is ordained with the Assemblies of God as well. So that's 5 generations of us. When I was a kid, we couldn't have guns and play cowboys and Indians because my dad didn't approve of that. We couldn't play war because that was also guns and so forth. So we played church. And, so one week I might be the pastor, and another week I might be the song leader and so forth. And that's what I grew up. By age 9, I was the church organist, for fact. Okay? My brothers and I, there were 5 of us. We sang and played instruments, and we went to all kinds of camp meetings and all kinds of old folks' homes and schools, and we did a routine. Okay. So that was all good, but, never think. When I think about my faith, I cannot remember a time when I did not know God. I remember being asked when I was going to be ordained, tell us about your conversion experience. And I said, I don't remember ever having one. And of course, that doesn't fly well in the Assemblies of God. You usually have to have a story. I mean, you can make one up, but I didn't have one. And I said, very honestly, I have no memory of not having a relationship with God. God has always been there, and I've always known it. Well, you must have had something. Okay, whatever. But it was in my teen years, I would say my late teen years, that people in the congregation where I was attending, especially when I went away to college, it was a large congregation, and I taught Sunday school, 5th grade boys, so forth, and people came to me and said, you know what, you ought to consider teaching. And it had never crossed my mind. In fact, they said, you need to teach the Bible. I thought, that sounds like it's right. It sounds, I remember saying to God, I don't want to be a church planter. That's too hard, I didn't really get to know my dad because he was always having to work, and I thought, So I committed myself to go into theological education, and as it turned out, I did a PhD. But in the process, I was moved from New Testament to church history for a very pragmatic reason. My primary mentor had gotten dementia, and another dean came and said, "If you'll go into church history, I'll guarantee you a job." And that's a pretty good reason. As it turned out, I never went to work for him, but I was hired by the seminary and have been now on staff there for 49 years and have taught for many, many years. I would say that my position as a minister was really something that grew out of my faith, and I made that commitment in 1970. It's also the case that as a Pentecostal, it's impossible for you to think about me as an ecumenist, but that comes as a result of a divine vision that I had one night. It came in a series of 3 in which I talked with God and God talked with me. Actually, he began the conversation. And I told him I didn't want to do that. I couldn't do that. I had no ability to do that. Okay, I'll do it, but you're going to have to take care of me because I know I'm going to get in trouble, and I did. It's changed. It's changed, and I love the job that I have. The seminary has been wonderful to me, and I think that the church is really beginning to open up and understand what it is to which God has called me in the Assemblies of God.
All right, thank you very much and for telling us. It's interesting to learn these things. We're perceived as being two-dimensional sometimes when we're on television like this, but thank you for being transparent about that.
Can I say a couple of things more, just real quick?
Well, very quickly. Yeah,
one is I'm married, and I have a wonderful wife, and her name is Patsy.
Absolutely.
And very soon we will celebrate our 50th anniversary. And we have 4 sons who have given us 9 grandchildren.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic. That really is. Thank you so much. Dr. Matthews.
Yes, my background is totally different from Mel's and Andrea's. I wasn't raised in church. Our parents didn't take us to church. In fact, I grew up in a broken home, a pretty, it's just a really bad experience with a lot of violence in the home. My parents divorced when I was around 12, and I was a latchkey kid. That I let myself in. I stayed with my dad for a couple years, let myself in the house by myself. There were some friends across the street when I was 12 or 13 who took me to church for the first time. I went there to play, and just to play it, I would hear the preacher's words every now and then, but we were just kind of playing in church. And then I moved back with my mom when I was about 15 or 16. I played basketball growing up in the inner city of Buffalo, New York, in the hood. The Lord gave me the talent to play basketball, and I was recruited from Niagara County Community College to come to play basketball in Texas. My claim to fame is I played against Dennis Rodman in college. I played against Chris Mullins in the Empire State Games. The older I get, the better I was. So, when I was playing basketball at Angelo State, I had a muscle calf tear and became very depressed, and people started talking to me about the gospel. I was in my dorm room, actually, and I had a book called Power for Living. It had the testimony of Julius Erving, Tom Landry in there, and in the back of the book, it had what we call the sinner's prayer. And I was really searching for the Lord. I prayed the prayer, asked the Lord to come into my heart in my dorm room, went back home to the church that my friends took me to when I was a teenager. The pastor had to make sure that I was legit. Got baptized, came back, and I wanted to, a year later, I just felt a call, the urge to teach and to release what I was reading. My first time even reading the Bible, or owning one, I was 22 years old. So I had this urge to teach and to preach, and I wanted to quit working on my bachelor's at Angelo State, and but I went on and finished my BA. Went to Southwestern Seminary, a 2-time graduate there, and from Criswell College. Had the privilege to teach adjunctively at both places, pastoring now for 30 years, married for 30 years, 3 kids. I love pool, love basketball, love movies. We're just everyday, regular people.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Dr. Trovall, you've been on the program for a few years now. We know what you do in terms of your professional life. Tell us how you got there.
Well, like Mel, as Lutheran, I was baptized. I mean, if I had to say that's my conversion day, I would say that would be it, right? When God picked me. But I grew up just always believing in God and Christ in particular. I mean, I think the spiritual formative moment for me was I thought I was going to hell. For sure, because I'd been doing something I shouldn't be doing. In fact, I knew because Jesus forgave my sins that I could do it over and over again and I'd always be forgiven. And then all of a sudden, I heard a sermon in which you can't do that. That's spiritually dangerous.
Yeah.
And
The
I
revolving door theory of
And so I went to
forgiveness,
my mom and I said, Mom, I think I'm not going to be in heaven. And Mom said, why is that? And I explained it. And I thought she was going to go, oh, Carl, we're going to miss you. This is so sad. But Mom said, oh, Carl, she says, I do that all the time. And I said, you do that all the time? She says, do you think that God didn't also forgive that sin? And I had, all of a sudden, my mind kind of exploded with how large God was, how graceful God was, how forgiving God was. And I was so liberated that I wanted, I mean, this in part shapes my vocation because I wanted to share that with other people. And I ended up going to seminary. I served in Laredo, and this is when I went to Laredo, I saw injustice like I'd never seen it. If you watch or listen to Garrison Keillor ever, and Prairie Home Companion, that's a little bit of my life, you betcha, from central Minnesota. So I went down to Laredo. And I never confronted such social injustice in my entire life. And it completely twisted my world up, which pushed me to go to Southern Methodist University to do study in ethics and social justice. And it was transformative. I ended up getting a job at Concordia, became a campus pastor, then professor. And I think the thing where I've changed the most is I'm probably more envious of other world religions than I've ever been in my life. I feel that every religious tradition has such a depth and richness that I want to spend 5 lifetimes immersing myself in those traditions and being a part of it. Because it's just so generous, the other religious traditions. That's a big way I've changed. And my wife, Carolyn, we have 2 kids, and now in our empty nesting, we bird a lot. We're going all over the world birding, so that's
all right.
Bird watching. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Levin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my upbringing was a little bit different, growing up Jewish as opposed to Christian. My family was active in a small synagogue, and one of the things I remember about growing up in that synagogue was it was a place where I felt like I mattered. And it was a place where I felt like my presence was desired. But I didn't, even though I was going through religious school, I had my bar mitzvah, my confirmation, I remember growing up being taught that I had to stay faithful to Judaism because 6 million people died so that I could stay faithful to Judaism. And I remember thinking, what was there in Judaism that was worth dying for? And I was always searching for that. And it happened through a few interesting bounces that I ended up spending my junior year at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and as a philosophy and religion major. And I saw a sign that said, if you want to learn more about your Judaism, come on Wednesday night to the Beit Midrash program, the study program. I said, okay. And they paired me up with an incredible rabbi as my study partner. In Hebrew, you call it a chevruta, your friend and learning companion, who introduced me to the very first verse of the book of Exodus. And it said, he said, read this. And I said, okay. These are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. He said, stop. I said, what? He said, well, don't you see everything that's in there? I go, I don't know, it looks like a pretty boring verse to me. And he says, no, take a look. He says, these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. Aren't Israel and Jacob the same person? And I said, I don't know. And so we ended up spending an hour exploring one verse. And I had this incredible spiritual rush that came from the engagement with the text. In Hebrew, they call it hitlahavut, where you have sort of an ecstatic excitement. And I remember feeling that same thing at moments of worship and in moments of study. And the more that I had the opportunity to learn, the more I felt that sense of hitlahavut, that inflaming excitement. And I wanted to share that experience with others, and I think that's what ultimately led me to the rabbinate, to congregational work.
Wow,
Awesome.
These are great testimonies and experiences. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, Reverend Plumley is going to tell us about his experience. But before that, there's an important announcement I'd like for you to hear, so please stand by. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, and I do look forward to hearing from you, so please drop us a line, go to the website, you can email us, or you can send us a card or a letter and tell us what you think about the program and for future topics you'd like to hear discussed. We're doing something different today. We've heard from all the panelists except for now Reverend Plumley. He's going to continue by telling us about his experience as how he came to be the pastor of his church.
Well, my experience is one of running as fast as I could in the opposite direction from where the call was coming. I am a preacher's kid, and I fell in love with a preacher's kid, and neither one of us wanted to have kids that were preachers' kids. And so, one thing that I knew and could assure her that I was never going to be was a minister. And she said, that's just fine with me. That's just about the only thing that I would prefer that you not be. And something happened beginning about then that made it increasingly difficult to continue to run away from that calling that was there. And I had been ordained about 15 years before I finally convinced myself that I was where I needed to be. I was a double major in TCU. I majored because they told me I had to declare a major, and I didn't want that to be religion because that would assume I was going into the ministry. So I was a double major in religion and political science, and I tried to go to both law school and divinity school after graduation, wanting to be a part of where the church affects public policy. And it took me a long time to realize that's in the local congregation, and it put me right back where I had thought I did not want to be. My father was the consummate shepherd. He was the lover of his people. And I had a pretty good idea that I could never do that. I could never love people that much. I have, however, given my life to that part of the ministry in a very keen way, in his memory, I guess, since he died about 2 years after I was ordained. I think that the Spirit of God is a dynamic force in the universe, and it takes form in many different people in many different ways. I am continually amazed at the ways that it takes form in different people in my own congregation, in the congregations that I have served, in people of other faiths, in clergy colleagues that do not accept Christ as Lord and Savior, as I do, and as those in the Christian tradition do. I'm lucky enough to have been brought up in a tradition that was quite open to the Spirit of God moving in many different ways in different people. We are a non-creedal church, As long as you believe that Jesus is Christ, we say, come on, we'll work out the differences. And that's been very helpful to me in my understanding of the way that God works in this world.
Thank you so very. This has been just fascinating, very interesting. Very quickly around the table, say your final farewells. We're toward the end of our program, so let's go around the table. Not a summary statement, just something you want to leave the audience with. Very quickly, 15 seconds.
First, what I would say is don't be afraid of doubt. Doubt is the engine of faith, and it sustained me.
Thank you, Dr. Robeck.
I would say don't be afraid of God and any call that God might make on your life, whether it's to clergy or to anything else. I think God gives you the gifts and you have the abilities. It's a matter of you believing that He's called you, and then you be obedient.
Thank you, Dr. Luxton.
I'd say embrace the journey. Psalm 139, Lord, you've searched me and you know me.
Amen. And then Rabbi.
Well, if I don't mention my wife of 25 years and my 3 rabbis' kids, which are the same as pastors' kids, then I'll be in trouble. But I would also quote the passage from the Psalms, B'takli bi b'toratecha, open my heart to your Torah, to your teaching.
And yes, Dr.
Always look at people's possibilities and not their actualities. God can use anyone.
And Reverend?
Even an introvert can step outside of her or himself enough to declare the good grace of God in this world.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I really have enjoyed this, and I hope you have too. And I want to thank the viewer who sent in the letter asking us to do this today. The panelists, I thank you, and may God continue to bless you in your various callings and the work that you do. For now, the charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.
Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by view.